being the sticky portion, and the gliadin is more of the protein. So there are two composites that coexist. They're in most grains. So when you look at all grains, grains have proteins that are called glutens. And currently labs only test for the gliadin markers. So you can miss different types of gluten sensitivities if you're just doing, for instance, IgE or IgG labs for gluten, because they're only testing one protein. There's a lot of labs out here now that are more sensitive than that. They're looking at all the different parts of wheat and how we react to them. And those are more appropriate tests now. Go ahead. So gluten sources, we have wheat, spelt, kamut, rye, barley, oats. 98% of oats are contaminated with wheat. Most wheats, when they say gluten-free, those still contain some proteins that a lot of people react to. Even people can go gluten-free. So I always talk to people about bringing those in and checking them. Also, one of the tests I'm going to go over is looking at all the immune cross-reactivity to wheat. That's something else that's very important for people with celiac or other autoimmune diseases. Okay. So the hidden sources of gluten are in all processed soy products. Most all of them, especially if they're from China, will have gluten in them. When you see modified cornstarch, that can also be gluten-containing. More times than not, it's gluten. Food emulsifiers and stabilizers, when you see those in processed foods, you're not sure what they are, probably gluten. Artificial food coloring contains gluten. A lot of malt extracts and flavorings, syrups, dextrins, maltodextrins. That is, when you see maltodextrins in a nutritional supplement, it's usually a tablet with a shiny coating on it. That's also a maltodextrin, giving it that texture. That's wheat. So if you're buying nutritional products from whatever vitamin store you're getting them from, you want to be sure what you're getting. And they're usually cheaper vitamins. So in most of the center of your grocery store is where you find processed wheat, corn, or soy. And that's usually the part that's a problem. Okay, go ahead. So again, if it's cheap food, it's probably gluten. Make sense? So the standard medical and some of the alternative allergy blood testing, they're not almost as sensitive as they should be.
And doctors don't always know when they should give them to you.
And you're absolutely
I
right.
got given the celiac test 6 months after I stopped eating gluten. I tried to tell the doctor beforehand, this won't work. He gave me a test, it came negative. He said, yeah, and he said, check the WebMD site. I'm like, okay, here's the WebMD site. Here's the section that says, the test does not work unless you are actively currently eating foods with gluten in them.
You can run a more sensitive test when you break down transglutaminase, though. And I've got that test up here, and I'll show that to you. It's a good one to run when somebody has already gone gluten-free for a long time. But you're absolutely right. You almost have to provoke those tests. Go out and eat pizza and beer, and then go do the test and see what shows up. Cool. Of course, if you're celiac or something like that, you're also going to produce some really bad abdominal symptoms and diarrhea or something else, or even possibly brain fog. One of the things about celiac disease that I don't think I'm going to tell you later on is that most all my celiac patients also test positive for neurologic brain antibodies. So do my autistic kids, which we talked about earlier. So it's very important to screen for those things to understand, well, can they have wheat or can't they? They tested negative for all their wheat tests, but they test positive for brain antibodies. That's indicative of a person who cannot have wheat, period. Make sense? Okay, go ahead. 2/3 of gluten-sensitive people probably have no symptoms. So most clinicians will not look for them, and you're alluding to that as well, that they don't look for these things unless you're having horrible symptoms. However, I can't tell you how many people I find with a variety of symptoms. Somebody will come in with fibromyalgia. Somebody will come in with brain fog. Somebody will come in with hormone imbalances or horrible menopause. Now these people, we check for this, and sure enough, they'll come up. Were they always gluten sensitive? Probably. It's in your genetics, but it also can be induced as well. And there are genetic markers that you can run in blood to find out whether you're susceptible or not, just like there are markers to find out whether you're pre-celiac or something like that. Or
is the genetic modification of the grains they're growing today contributing to more people's sensitivity showing?
I'm going to answer that question in about 3 more slides. All right. So I'm going to go over that in juicy detail with you. There's a difference between GMO and what's hybridized. and I'll talk to you more about
Well,
it.
just in general, without the GMO, they've been breeding it over generations,
Right.
red and fluffier, which
that-
means there's more and more gluten.
So that's when you hybridize the plants.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
more. There's not a lot of control in that. And I'm
Yeah.
going to go over that again. Go ahead. So when we break down wheat, you're breaking down. First of all, we have the gluten we talked about. Remember, you break that down to a gliadin and a glutenin. What's most tested is just the gliadin marker, and that's all we look at. So if you go to a standard medical office and they run a whole different allergy profile on you, which is also a marker IgE, you know what that is, right? When they run that, they're running something where they would have anaphylactic reactions against a gliadin marker. That's it. There's not many people in the population that get those. Not even celiac patients. Some celiac patients don't get that. So you have to run an appropriate blood test to find out what these are. You have to run other antibodies. You have to run other different proteins. There's an IgE marker, an IgG, and then an SIGA. Those are markers that they'll find that come positive to foods that are more sensitive than just an IgE lysa. Yes.
Do you have a sheet that says what we should ask for if we ever get those?
I have some tests, some sample tests coming up. Okay, they're right there. Yes.
Is Prometheus still a reliable lab for the full gamut?
From what I found, no. Sorry.
Is there one local?
Now there's one local here. One that I like to use that I've found is Cyrex, and they've got the PhD who runs that is somebody who's well renowned for his all the work he's done in immunology, and I think he's got the best science behind his tests. There's other labs
Could you
out there
spell
too.
that again?
Cyrex is CYREX. I'm going to show you some examples of the
Oh.
Cyrex tests. I like those because when we'll just break from this for a second here, but when you look at labs, you're looking at what the difference is from a range of people from about 5 to 65 years old, right? What's normal for that group? Well, that may not be normal on an individual basis. And then you're going to take it about 3 or 4 standard deviations beyond that, and that narrows or lays out this distribution of ranges. So those aren't very specific. Now, if you take that and you narrow that group down, and you only maybe do 2 standard deviations, that specifies more whether that person's going to be positive or not.
Is that a normal distribution?
Pardon me?
Is it a normal distribution? So are you talking about 2 standard deviations from the mean, which would be
Well, yeah,
about
you're not taking.
you're talking about the last 2.5% of the tail, or
No, you're talking about a more refined part of the population.
are you talking about standard deviations on both sides added? So
It's both sides.
Okay, I was going one direction, so I was a little confused.
Both sides. So now let's go back to this when we're breaking down wheat. Again, now there are other lab tests here that will break down the gliadin to the alpha, beta, omega, and gammas. We find that a lot of celiac patients only test positive for the gamma gliadins. A standard wheat profile wouldn't find that. And if you break that down even further and you're looking for the variety of different transglutaminase, not just the one they look for, not just an IgE or IgG, you might find that they'd be positive to that. For those of you who don't know, when you look at this enzyme, it's broken, that wheat breaks down, and is contained within wheat. This is what they utilize to find celiac disease. They look for antibodies against this enzyme. So as we break gluten down, we break it into glutenin, and we also find that glutenin tests positive in a lot of autistic kids. When you break this down even farther, you find that glutenin breaks into something called gluteomorphin and proteogluten. And those are the things that act like opiates. So that's why you crave a piece of bread or you smell it, you go, oh, boy, that is just something. Well, that can be something where you're positive to the antibodies to the gluteomorphins, and it creates an opioid response, an addictive response. Further, this both break down to transglutaminase, which further breaks down to what are called deaminated gliadins, and there's a whole range of them. Now, these are the most reactive, and there's only a few labs now that are just testing these. But these are people who will go gluten-free, but they eat sausages, and they'll have red wine. Gluten-free, right? Well, the deaminated gliadins from wheat are also contained in red wine. Part of the, when you ferment wine, you have to throw sulfites in it. the sulfites contain deaminated gliadins from wheat. And that's why a lot of red wine is actually something that celiac patients should not have. So I'm doing another
It's
lecture.
not in white wine.
Yeah, you don't see it as much in the white wine, but if they're using the same type of sulfites, it's in the white wine as well. Yeah.
We're using sausages that are packaged as gluten-free.
Does that work?
More than likely, if it states gluten-free and there's not a lot of preservatives in it,
Yeah.
There's none.
it does not have that.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's no preservatives,
No preservatives.
then you know it probably doesn't contain any of these.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Now, these things here are actually some of the most reactive parts of wheat. And there's no way you're going to find that on any kind of standardized test that's out there right now. You have to be very specific to find it.
Is there any idea? I'm just wondering, if someone is sensitive to gluten in whatever form, can they react on an olfactory dimension, or is it simply eating it?
Can they react on what now?
In other words,
smell.
olfactory
Like
sensation,
if,
okay.
if someone's baking something and you're inhaling it, is it just a psychosomatic response if you're feeling like I don't like that, or is your body actually getting a little bit of like ooh?
That's a great question. I have patients.
Yeah.
I have some people. There's got to be some people that are reacting psychosomatically, but I do have a patient who is severely gluten sensitive, and I'm sure he's sensitive to most all the pathways through here.
Yeah.
He works in a bakery,
Oh.
and he says, I told him for a
But you
while
can
he
absorb
can't
it
sample
through
his
your
food.
skin.
Yeah.
He can't sample his food anymore. He said, I'm not sampling my food. I'm not doing anything. I'm still getting these reactions. I still got horrible allergies. And my gut's bad. And I'm saying, are you breathing it? And he says, well, yeah. When I breathe it, I smell it.
Yeah.
If you look at this, and I'm sure you remember this since your school is so fresh, in order to smell something, a particle, a molecule, or something has to hit the part of the nerve in your olfactory mucosa. When that particle hits the nerve, that stimulates the nerve till it gets to the brain, and now you smell something. So yes, a particle of that is sensitive to the immune mucosa as well in the nasal area where the olfactory sensation takes place. So it can happen.
Yeah.
It can happen.
I would imagine in a bakery,
In
that
a
stuff was just
gluten-free
flying in the
bakery,
air.
They will make sure a number of hours has gone by as well as the thorough cleaning.
Yeah. Well, that's
Or
just like
to go gluten products.
Bridget's place here too. She had to go certain certification to make sure her entire kitchen had no gluten. And if there's any gluten that enters that kitchen, it has to be isolated from everything in the kitchen. Almost it isn't submerged. You know, they have to be.
But you've got
careful.
ovens with fans,
Yeah.
especially convection ovens.
Yeah. And now,
It gets out in the air, and then if you don't have enough time.
yeah,
then-
it's interesting. Interesting question. Thanks for asking that. That was a good one to bring up. Z Pizza. I was foolish to offer that to my patients and say, go to Z Pizza. They offer a gluten-free and a dairy-free pizza. Until I went there and actually checked it. I should have been there first. That was we all learn from our mistakes, don't we?
Yeah.
Right.
When I went there, I realized they were making their gluten-free dough
Right next
in
to
the same area where they're making the rest of their dough. And I approached them on it. I said, hey, this is not gluten-free. You're not making it in an isolated area. And he said, well, this is the way my management told me to do it. And of course,
Plus, it should be in a separate oven, even if you're going to.
it should be in a separate oven, exactly. So I made it aware to them. I tried to call the person who owned the franchises, and they didn't get back to me at all. Probably for good reason. He was probably fearful of a lawsuit. But I did see later on a big sign up front in there that said that this is not considered gluten-free because we don't have everything isolated and permitted and so forth. So be careful.
Yeah.
When they're advertising that, you want to see that it's isolated, especially if